All right, it is 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's the time to start this webinar. What's up, everyone? Really happy you've joined us today. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ross Rinehart, and we'll be doing a little webinar today for your viewing and informational pleasure. The title of our webinar is How to Prepare for a Changing LSAT. My name is Ross Rinehart. I am the Director of Content and Head of Instruction here at LSATMax. I've been in this role for a couple years now. Really excited to be here today. Quickly about myself, I've been in the LSAT prep space for about 10 years now, 10 years in the game, I guess you could say. I've worked for a few different companies. I've done a variety of tasks from teaching in-person and live online courses to one-on-one tutoring to making courses, making content, doing marketing, a whole bunch of stuff. I now kind of make the content behind the scenes at LSATMax and head our wonderful team of instructors, hiring and training and coaching them, providing them with resources so they can deliver the best experience possible to their students. Another thing I've done in the LSAT space is make a lot of free content. If there's someone who has made more free content for the LSAT, I've not met that person. I've written a lot of blog posts that provide advice and information on the LSAT over the years in a variety of places. I continue to do that with LSATMax today. We'll be showing you links to a couple recent blog posts that pertain to our topic of today. Really like to give as much free content to the student population, those who are studying for the LSAT, because I really don't think there should be major impediments on taking the LSAT and feeling confident while you're taking the LSAT and eventually getting into the law school of your dreams. So I try to put as much free stuff out there as possible. And fortunately, I found a great partner, a great employer at LSATMax who are on the same page and want to do that as well. And another way we provide free information to people who are looking to take the LSAT is through webinars like these, how to prepare for a changing LSAT. And the LSAT is changing this year. We just started a new test year for the LSAT. For whatever reason, the LSAT test year goes from June of one year to May of the following year. So we just started the 2023-2024 test year, and there's going to be some changes starting with the August 2023 LSAT in about 2.5 weeks. Now, in my position, which is mostly behind the scenes, but I do still interact with students a fair amount, I see a lot of confusion about what is and isn't changing with the LSAT, and how that might affect their study plans for preparing for the LSAT. So I wanted to host this webinar today to just clarify what is going to be changing about the LSAT and what isn't going to be changing about the LSAT. And given what is and isn't changing, how to prepare for the LSAT to make sure we're giving ourselves the best shot at earning our target score that'll help us get into the law school that we want to go to, whatever that law school or law schools happen to be. So in this webinar, it's going to give us an opportunity to answer a lot of student questions. Questions you might have, like, how is the test formatted? Is that changing? What concepts are going to appear on the LSAT? Are those changing? So beyond the specific, sections you might have heard of, like logical reasoning or logic games for reading comprehension, what are the ideas behind these sections? What are the concepts that we have to learn and get really confident with in order to succeed on the LSAT? So we'll be answering that today. We'll also be answering questions like, how is the LSAT scored? How should I study for the LSAT to get the score I want to get? When should I take the LSAT? Is there a better time to take the LSAT than others? When should I plan to take it? How long might studying take? And how can I get the most out of the study process? Studying for the LSAT takes a different amount of time for everybody based on your goals, your starting point, how much time you have to dedicate to LSAT studies. But what's true for everyone who's studying for the LSAT is they want to do their studying as quickly as possible. You don't want to spend more time studying for the LSAT then you have to. So how can we make sure that we're making our study process as efficient as possible so we don't need to spend more time studying for the LSAT than we have to? So we'll address some ideas about how we can get the most out of the study plan today. And as you may be inferred from the title of this webinar, we'll also talk about how is the LSAT changing. That'll actually be the first and the last things we talk about today. How's the LSAT changing? First, I just want to kind of talk about quickly what is and isn't changing on the LSAT, because as I said before, we get a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's new information, what's old information, what's outdated, what's still in play. So in terms of a lot of ideas, a lot of factors in the LSAT, how is it formatted? What are the sections? How many of those sections are there? What content appears on those sections? Where can I take the test? How often can I take the test? What are the rules that govern taking the test? Who enforces those rules? Who proctors those exams? How many times can I retake the test? And score preview, which allows you to kind of cancel your score after seeing it. Which of those aren't changing in this new LSAT year, and which of them are changing in this year? Let's first start off by just sorting them into their appropriate categories. As you can see, test format and test content, what sections appear on the test, and what ideas appear in those sections, that's not changing. I hear from a lot of students who believe that specifically the logic game section is definitely going away in 2023. That's not the case. I also hear from some students who are a little bit confused on the number of sections that are going to appear on their LSAT. Is it going to go back to a 3-section test? Is it going to go back to a 5-section test? No. That's not changing this year. It will remain a 4-section test in which 3 of those sections are scored. That's staying the same. We'll dive more into that in just a moment. Additionally, the amount of times the test is going to be held in this year is about the same as the number of times it's been held in previous years. The rules that govern how you take the test, those aren't changing. And the score preview isn't changing. That's going to remain an option for you if you wish to take advantage of it. And I'll describe what that score preview option is in just a bit. Things that are changing this year. Number 1, test locations. That's the big one. Now, you are going to, for the first time in 2023, 2024, have the option to take the test either at home or at a test center. That's never happened before. It used to be that you had to take it in a test center. Then with the COVID-19 pandemic, it changed to where you had to take it at home. And now they're offering both as options. So you can choose whether you take it at home, remotely on your computer, or whether you go to a test center and take it there. So talk a little bit about what that test center experience is going to look like and how to best prepare for it towards the end of the webinar today. Another thing that's changing in 2023, 2024 is the proctors. Now, they are going to remain proctors, whether you take the exam at home or in a test center, but who is doing the proctoring is changing. Over the last few years, a service called ProctorU has been doing the proctoring. They will no longer be responsible for the proctoring of the LSAT. They will be replaced by Prometric. Prometric is going to be doing the remote proctoring and also the test center proctoring. So who's doing the proctoring, who's enforcing the rules, that is changing. Also, another fun thing that's changing, maybe fun thing, not really a fun thing, I don't know why I said that. Something that is changing is the limits on the number of times you can retake the test. That is changing for the removing a yearly limit on how many times you can take the test in 2023, 2024. We'll talk about that towards the end. But as you can see, most of the things with the LSAT are staying the same. So most of our advice about studying for the LSAT will remain the same. So I want to kind of talk about what's on the test and how to deal with that, how often the test is given, when to take it, how the test is scored, all of that. Give you some advice on how to prepare for that LSAT. Let's get into that. We're going to start with what's on the LSAT. Before we get into the meat of today's webinar, just a couple of quick notes about how to ask questions during this webinar. Katie, my colleague, just dropped a message on this in the chat section, but just so you hear it from me as well. 2 questions you might have during this webinar. 2 types of questions. First type of question is a question about what I'm talking about, like right now in the moment, as it pertains to this webinar. If you have a question that relates to what I'm talking about right now or at any point in this webinar, go ahead and drop that question in the chat section. I'll be monitoring that chat section throughout this webinar, keeping an eye on it, seeing any questions that you might have. So if you have a question like, hey, I didn't catch that last thing you said, could you please repeat it? Or could you clarify what you just said about blah, blah, blah? If you have a question that's relevant to the moment, put it in the chat section. I'll answer it as quickly as I can. Another type of question you might have, though, is a question that's not directly related to what I'm talking about. Might be a more general question about preparing for the LSAT or advice about a specific section of the LSAT. Whatever your question is, if it doesn't relate to what I'm talking about in the moment, I'm going to ask that you please put that in the Q&A section. So in the Q&A section, it'll store your question, and I'm going to have a chance to answer all of those kind of extra questions at the end of today's webinar. So if a question pops into your head like, hey, I really want to know Ross's advice on how to get better on reading comprehension or whatever, put that in the Q&A section and hang around for the rest of the webinar, and I'll have a chance to answer that at the end of the webinar. So we all good on that? 2 types of questions, where to put them? Cool. Let's dive in to what's on the LSAT. So for understandable reasons, there remains a bit of confusion amongst LSAT students on what the LSAT that they're about to take is even going to look like. And that's because over the last few years, there have been several changes to the format of the LSAT. And to be honest, the LSAT prep industry hasn't done the best job of communicating what those changes are to the population of students who are preparing to take the LSAT. So like I said before, there's a little bit of confusion on how many sections there's going to be on the LSAT, what those sections are going to look like, whether those sections are going to change this year. So let's just start out by making sure we're all on the same page of what the test we're about to take is going to look like. So the LSAT kind of rounded into its modern form in 1991. Don't tell me how many of you were not even close to being born in 1991, because that will make me feel like an old skeleton. But since 1991, the LSAT has always had the same 3 sections, and those same 3 sections are going to appear on the test in 2023, 2024 as well. We have logical reasoning, analytical reasoning, and reading comprehension. Those have been the 3 sections of the LSAT since 1991, continue to this day. Now, all 3 of these sections are composed of multiple choice questions. In logical reasoning, you'll get between 24 and 26 multiple choice questions, usually 25 or 26. Analytical reasoning, between 22 and 24 multiple choice questions, usually 23. And in reading comp, between 26 and 28 multiple choice sections, usually 27. Now, that name analytical reasoning is the official name for that section, but almost no one calls it that. It's a little bit kind of hard to tell what that section is going to be or how it's going to be different from logical reasoning. So pretty much everyone calls that section logic games. Sounds more fun, sounds more inviting, sounds more interesting. Also easier to distinguish from logical reasoning. So the only people that I'm aware of that still really call that section analytical reasoning are the people who make and administer the LSAT. You're mostly going to hear that section referred to as logic games. So moving forward in this webinar, I will be referring to that section as logic games. Now, like I said, these are the 3 sections that have been on the LSAT since 1991, and they are the 3 sections that are going to remain on the LSAT that you take this year. So we're all clear about that. But the number of these sections has changed a little bit over the years. So I want to talk about what the LSAT looked like between the years of 1991 and 2020. Now, when you took the LSAT in the years between 1991 and 2020, you took a 6-section LSAT. And on this 6-section LSAT, each section being, by the way, 35 minutes, although accommodations were available for test takers who have a recognized disability. These sections could be extended to 53 or 70 minutes, depending on the nature of that recognized disability. But 6 sections, 35 minutes each was the standard. 5 of those sections were going to be multiple choice. So you had 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 logic game section, 1 reading comprehension section, and those 4 sections would all be scored. Your performance on those 4 sections would eventually result in a score. But there was a 5th unscored multiple choice section. That section was called the experimental section. Now, the experimental section could have been a 3rd logical reasoning section. It could have been a 2nd logic game section. It could have been a 2nd reading comprehension section. It looked like any other section. It was indistinguishable from any other section. It just happened to not count towards your final score. And of course, these sections didn't necessarily appear in this order. They could be mixed up, a bunch of different orders, kind of hard to tell what order your LSAT would be given in, but those 5 sections would all be in multiple choice, and they would be your first 5 sections, whatever order they appeared in. You had this 5th section, though, or sorry, the 6th section, this non-multiple choice section that was always given at the end of the test, and it was called the writing section. You would handwrite a response to an essay prompt, and you'd have 35 minutes to do so. They didn't score this response in any way. However, they would send copies of your handwritten essay to all the law schools you applied to. So again, this was the LSAT that existed between 1991 and 2020, but that's not the LSAT that exists today. A couple other notable features of the past LSAT: it was administered in person. You'd go to like a hotel or a college classroom or a law school classroom, and you would have to wait in line because everyone who was taking the LSAT at that location took it at the same time. They have to check everyone in, make sure they didn't bring anything that wasn't allowed, read all the rules of taking the LSAT. It would take hours to get checked into the LSAT and actually sit down and take it. You take it in a room full of people who are just as nervous, if not more nervous than you were. Everyone's, jittery, scared, tapping their feet, banging their pencils. It was a whole thing. Check-in time was also usually 8:30 a.m., maybe not quite the time we would like to be taking a very rigorous test. So yeah, that was the old LSAT. Not the LSAT you'll be taking, though. The LSAT that you'll be taking now only has 4 sections, all of which are multiple choice. So we've really shrunk the LSAT down back from its old format into its current format. It's all multiple choice. There's going to be 4 multiple choice sections. You're going to have 1 logical reasoning, 1 logic games, 1 reading comp, and 1 experimental section. So 4 multiple choice sections, 3 of those are scored. Those scored sections will be the logical reasoning, logic games, and reading comprehension section. And again, you're going to have this experimental section that could be a 2nd logical reasoning, logic games, or reading comp section. Now, you will also, and again, that logical reasoning or that experimental could be another logical reasoning or logic games or reading comp. And again, these sections don't necessarily appear in that order. They can really appear in any order. So we're going to see those get mixed up. Hard to predict which order you'll be getting those sections in. Now, the writing section didn't go away. You just don't have to take it on the same day that you take the multiple choice sections on the LSAT anymore. The writing section has moved to a remote testing option. It's not really an option. You have to take it remotely, but you can complete it anytime you like. You can complete it as early as 8 days before your LSAT or as late as a year after you take your LSAT. However, you need to have an approved writing section submission on file before they give you your score back. So we usually recommend taking the writing section about within a week after taking your LSAT. No need to worry about taking it before you take the LSAT. It's not necessary. You should be focusing on studying during that time. However, within a week of taking the LSAT, go through the process of completing the writing section. You do it on your computer anytime you like. The testing software is going to record you taking the LSAT, or sorry, taking the writing section of the LSAT, and it's going to be sent to a kind of AI-powered review thing to make sure nothing was amiss. They'll record your response and then allow you to get your LSAT score back. So it takes about 3 weeks to get your LSAT score back after taking the test. So we recommend finishing the writing section within a week of taking the LSAT. So just in case your writing section gets rejected for whatever reason, you have time to take it again and hopefully be a little bit more careful with following the rules so you can get that submission approved and then get your writing section back. Or sorry, get your LSAT score back. So like I said, this isn't changing. This is the format of the test. It's not changing in 2023. So we're all on the same page, so you don't, hear anything else down the line and get confused. This is what your LSAT is going to be looking like. This is what's on the LSAT. Now, a couple of other differences between the old LSAT and the new LSAT, kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at and how that's changed over time. Old LSAT, that 6-section test, obviously that would be over 4 hours long. That's not even counting the extra time it took to check into that. So people would be spending like over 6 hours sometimes in their test center with the old LSAT. Current LSAT, much shorter, don't have to take the writing section, 1 section shorter, only about 2.5 hours long. Now the old LSAT, you had to take it at a test center and everyone took it at the same time. Now you take it at home. It's proctored by real people still, but if you take it at home, but now you also have the option to take it at the test center too. So old LSAT, you had to drive somewhere, take it at a test center. New LSAT, you have options. You can pick which one makes more sense to you. If you prefer the convenience of taking it at home, you have a good internet connection, you have the right equipment, you feel better about taking it at home, you feel like you're going to be more comfortable. If you take it at home, you can do that. However, if you don't have a quiet space at home, you don't have a private space at home, if you don't trust your internet connection, if you don't have the right equipment, you can drive to a test center and take it there. Now, old LSAT, as I mentioned before, also one day, usually at 8:30 a.m., not maybe the best time to be taking a rigorous logical test. Current LSAT, it's given over multiple days. Most LSATs in 2023 to 2024 are going to be given over 2 days, Friday and a Saturday. You can pick which day makes more sense to take for you. And you can also choose the time you'd like to take the test at. There's going to be many options available, both on Friday and Saturday, both if you choose to take it at home or at a test center. So you get to choose the time that makes sense for you. Maybe if you're usually studying for the LSAT around noon, it would make sense then to take the LSAT around noon. That's kind of where you train your brain to do LSAT-related tasks. So you can choose to take the LSAT at that time. You can schedule your LSAT through what's called the Prometric Scheduler. I think it's shortened to Pro Scheduler on their website. And usually the scheduling options open about a month before the test. For the August test, they're open right now. So I mentioned this not only to give you some historical context on what the LSAT will look like, but also just to remind you that sometimes you'll hear outdated advice about that old test. Like, it's not like all of the old blog posts and videos about the old test just disappeared from the LSAT, disappeared from the internet when the LSAT changed in 2021. So you'll sometimes hear advice about that old test, and that can be confusing for you. Like, wait, I thought it was 4 sections. You're telling me it's 6 sections. oh, you're telling me I can only take it at a test center? I can't choose the time? You'll sometimes encounter material about that old test, but rest assured, you're taking the new test. That's the format, that's the scheduling options, that's how it's going to work. So keep that in mind. If you hear something that doesn't sound right, there's a very good chance you're hearing advice about that old test. So just so you're not confused as you navigate these sometimes confusing information out there. Another thing that makes the LSAT a little bit confusing is the materials you will use to prepare for the LSAT. Now, the old LSAT, the one that was 6 sections long with 5 multiple choice sections, that was the format that was released to us for almost all of the practice tests. So whether you're using Law Hub or a service like LSATMax or someone else, most of your studying is going to be done with material from the over 90 released practice exams. Now, most of those practice exams were taken from the old test. They don't release the experimental sections. However, they do release the 4 sections that were scored. So every practice test has 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 logic game section, and 1 reading comprehension section. So as you notice, that's a little bit different than the current format of the LSAT, right? The practice tests have 4 sections, all of which are scored, whereas the current version of the test has 3 sections that are scored. Additionally, with the practice test based on the old LSAT, we have 2 scored logical reasoning sections. So logical reasoning is just weighted more heavily on these practice tests than it is on the current version of the LSAT. So what's a little bit tricky is that you take these practice exams, they're weighting your logical reasoning performance a little bit more than the current LSAT would, 13 percentage points more. So we've kind of have a fix for it at LSATMax. When you take practice exams at LSATMax, we only score 1 logical reasoning, 1 logic games, and 1 reading comprehension section when you take the LSAT. We'll tell you how you did on that unscored logical reasoning section, but we're not going to actually count it towards your final score. So we only score those 3 out of the 4 sections to make sure that the score we give you on these practice tests is predictive and consistent with the score you would get on the real LSAT. That unscored logical reasoning section is kind of filling the role of the experimental section on the current version of the LSAT. Sir, I got a question from Angelina, who asked if I could clarify a bit on the experimental section. The experimental section is a section that is on the current version of the LSAT. It's a multiple choice section, and it's going to be indistinguishable from any other multiple choice section. So it's going to look like a second logical reasoning section, or a second logic game section, or a second reading comprehension section. When you're doing the experimental section, you're not going to know that you're doing the experimental section. It's only going to be after the fact that you realize, like, oh, that second section that I took wasn't scored. That must have been the experimental section. Now, if you're asking why there's the experimental section, it's there so that the test makers can try out questions that they want to use on future exams, and also to get data on student performance on those questions, which helps them do things like score the test, which we'll talk about in just a moment. All right, so again, another source of confusion about what's on the LSAT is the practice tests. Over at LSATMax, we make sure we score those practice tests in a way that's consistent with the current version of the LSAT. Now, we talked about the kind of sections that appear on the LSAT, but we haven't really talked about is what are the concepts that appear on the LSAT, because at the end of the day, that's what you're learning. You're not learning logical reasoning, you're learning the skills that logical reasoning tests. You're not learning logic games, you're learning the skills that logic games test. You're not learning reading comprehension, you're learning the skills that reading comprehension tests. You get the point. When you ask a lot of test prep providers, what are these skills? What does logical reasoning test? What does reading comprehension test, etc., you'll get a lot of, in my opinion, sometimes confusing and arcane answers. You ask them what's on the LSAT, what are these skills? They'll say stuff like it's deductive logic, it's argument evaluation, it's formal logic, spatial reasoning. I don't really like those terms though. I think those are kind of intentionally confusing. Kind of makes the LSAT sound a little bit harder, a little bit less intuitive than it is. And sometimes I think people use those words to make it seem like you need their expertise to use the LSAT. I think you can definitely benefit from many test prep providers' expertise, but I want to give it to you straight. I don't want to leave you scratching your chin, just wondering what's actually on this test. So I'm going to try to give it to you in as layman's terms as I can provide. What are the skills that the LSAT tests? Well, in my opinion, the LSAT tests 3 skills: reading, analyzing, and connecting. Those are the 3 big overarching skills that you need to learn for the LSAT. And if you even want a more simple version of this, like we could maybe even replace that word analyzing with the word thinking. Reading, thinking, and connecting. Now, obviously, these are very broad ideas, are also ideas that you already know how to do. Let's talk about specifically how the LSAT will test these 3 big ideas, starting with reading. Now, obviously, we all know how to read already, but what the LSAT is going to challenge you to do is understand passages that are written in a deliberately confusing way. So the LSAT's not an easy read. They're not going to give you information in a user-friendly way. They're going to make the information hard to read and decipher. And you're going to have to, on a timed test, quickly figure out what these passages that are deliberately confusing are even saying. Now, why are they writing the LSAT in kind of a bad way? Well, it's because that's how lawyers write. That's how judges write. That's how the law is written. That's how statutes are written. They're confusing. They're hard to parse. So what law schools are interested is how well can this person, this potential applicant, parse hard to read information? Because when you get into law school, you'll be reading a lot of cases that are hard to understand. You'll be reading a lot of statutes and codes of civil procedure and criminal procedure that are hard to read. And that is going to be very, very difficult to do. So the LSAT is going to challenge your ability to do that. I'll answer your question, Dele, in just a moment after I finish this spiel on reading. So just hang tight. So with reading the LSAT, you will need to address this ability of reading. A reliable study plan will have to tell you how you can deconstruct and understand what you've read. And in my opinion, this is an aspect of teaching the LSAT that far too many instructors and test prep companies overlook. They assume you can already do this. But in my experience, 10 years of working with students, a lot of us need help doing this. We need a little bit of assistance learning to read in the language that the LSAT is written in. Of course, at LSATMax, I've had the opportunity to introduce a number of lesson plans, office hours, resources to help you do that. They're on the free account if you want to check that out. But like I said, this is a big skill that's tested on the LSAT, so we want some assistance on how to do that. And turning my attention back to Dele's question, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Dele asks, if we take the test in person, do you have to take the writing section the same day, or are they allowing you to take it at home? Also, is the in-person electronically or paper-based? Great questions, Dele. I'll answer them quickly. You take the test in person, you have to take the writing section at home. The writing section is not offered at the test centers. The writing section has to be taken at home, or at least in some private room on some computer. You can't take it at a test center. Secondly, if you take it at the test center, the LSAT is not paper-based. you'll be taking the LSAT on computers that are provided to you by the test center. So you don't have to bring in your own computer. In fact, you can't bring in your own computer. You'll be taking the LSAT on the computers that the test center provides you. However, whether you take the LSAT at home or in the test center, the test interface is going to be the same. Test interface is the same, irrespective of whether you take the LSAT at home or at test center. So great questions. I should have clarified that earlier. Thanks for asking. All right, back to the skills on the LSAT. We have reading. We also have analyzing and connecting. Now that analyzing is a little bit vague. Like I said, we could also even think of that as thinking. What type of thinking do you have to do on the LSAT? What type of analyzing do you have to do on the LSAT? We have to think about information like a lawyer would think about information. And how lawyers think about information, they think about it argumentatively. Now, all the time you hear people who are like, oh, I was told to be a lawyer because I'm argumentative. I was like a really argumentative kid. I was always, talking back, being sassy, whatever. So they're like, you should be a lawyer. Now, it's true that you have to think argumentatively as a lawyer, but when people say, oh, you're argumentative, so you make a great lawyer, they're kind of misusing that word argumentative. Kind of an equivocation. When I say lawyers think argumentatively, what I mean is that they think about the arguments they want to make, the evidence that they have, and the conclusion that they want a jury or a judge or a client to reach. So when they think argumentatively, they're thinking about maybe problems with the arguments that they're going to present to a jury or a judge or a client. This is the evidence I have. This is the conclusion I want them to reach. Are they going to reach that conclusion? Did I provide them enough evidence? Is there anything wrong with my evidence? Am I making any assumptions that they might not share? Or they're thinking about the opposing counsel's argument. Oh, this is the opposing counsel's argument. This is their evidence. This is their conclusion that they want me to reach. How can I attack it? What's wrong with their evidence? Are they making any assumptions? Is there any alternative conclusions I can get them to reach? Is there any way I can attack their argument on cross-examination? This is how lawyers think. This is how they think argumentatively. And once they think about whether their arguments are good arguments or bad arguments, they have to think about how to strengthen or weaken those arguments. Okay, this is the argument I want to make. I can see it's not so great. How can I strengthen it? What do I need to provide to make that a more persuasive argument? Or this is the argument that the opposing counsel wants to make. How do I attack that argument? How do I weaken it? How do I point out problems and make those problems evident to a judge, jury, or a client? So that's the type of thinking that the LSAT is going to be challenging to do. Now, if you're worried that thinking in this kind of argumentative way doesn't come naturally to you, it is a learnable system. And I think we have the tools to help you learn it. Seeing a couple questions in the chat section, so I'll pause briefly to answer those. First question is from Sarah asking, what are we allowed to have on test day? Is water allowed? Yep, water is allowed. They're not going to deprive you of some basic needs. The rules for everything that's allowed on test day is on LSAC's website. It's pretty commonsensical. You're allowed to have some water. You're allowed to have foam earplugs if noise is going to be an issue for you. You're allowed to have scratch paper to do some of the kind of written elements of the LSAT that you might want to do, but you're not allowed to have, things that you probably don't need to have on the LSAT. So if you want further clarification on that, I would recommend you go to the LSAC's website, look at their test day rules, what is and isn't allowed. Most of the stuff that you're going to need is allowed. Stuff you don't need, probably not allowed. Arlie asks, I'm trying to attend law school by the fall of next year. When is the latest I can take the LSAT? Am I able to take it in 2024 or does it have to be in 2023? You're anticipating a section of this, so I'm going to answer that question later, Arlie. I would recommend that you take it in 2023. However, you can take it in 2024 if necessary. So a little spoiler on that section. Garrett also has a question. If you've already taken the writing section once and decide to take the LSAT again, is it recommended to do the writing section a second time? No, unless you were really displeased with your writing submission for whatever reason the first time. You don't have to take it again to get your score back. As long as you took the writing section within the last 5 years, and you still have an approved submission on file, you don't need to take it again, and I probably wouldn't worry about it as long as you're relatively happy with your submission the first time. Cool, good questions. Back to what's on the LSAT. So last skill I want to touch on is connecting. What does that mean on the LSAT? Well, in the LSAT, we have to draw connections between multiple pieces of information. Basically, if fact A is true and fact B is true, how can we connect those two facts and figure out whether fact C is also true? It's another really important skill on the LSAT. That's because that's what lawyers have to do when they're doing things like case analysis or statutory analysis. These are the facts of my case. This is what the rules are, whether those rules come to us from laws that were written by lawmakers like Congress, or rules that reach us through cases, case law, as written by judges. These are the rules. These are my facts. How can I connect my facts to these rules to figure out what a judge might do in the case, or figure out what a jury might conclude in my case? So just like lawyers have to kind of connect facts with case law to figure out what conclusions might be reached, so will you have to connect various facts and rules on the LSAT to draw new conclusions. The easiest way to do this on the LSAT for most of us is going to be using scratch paper to actually draw out these connections. So always make sure to have scratch paper at the ready, whether you're studying for the LSAT, taking a practice exam, or taking a real exam. So those are the three big skills on the LSAT. And that's as simply as I can put it. Don't need to worry about confusing terms like formal logic, spatial reasoning, argument analysis, and stuff like that. Let's just use some simpler terms: reading, analyzing, or thinking, and connecting. Now you will need to do all three of these things on all three sections. It's not the case that logical reasoning is only about analyzing, and logic games is only about connecting, and reading comprehension is only about reading. You'll have to do all three of these things on all three sections. Now, logical reasoning really challenges you to do all three of these things in about equal measure. Logic games focuses more on the connecting part. Reading comprehension focuses more on the reading and analysis part, but you do have to do a little bit of all three things for all three sections. Seeing a quick request to go back to the last slide, so I will do that quickly. Let that person take a screenshot. While that's happening, there's another question from Ethan. Ethan asks, will they allow scratch paper still at the LSAT testing center, or do you have to use the Surface Go notes? I'd have to double check that for you. I believe they have a note take. They do have a note taking function at the test center. However, I think they also allow scratch paper. So let me double check that for you. Maybe Katie can look that up on the LSAT website, but pretty sure that is, and she'll provide an answer for you. So also want to talk about how the LSAT is scored, because this is subject to a lot of confusion on the for people taking the LSAT. So we're going to talk about how the LSAT is scored and what's a good score. So there's going to be two LSAT scores that you care about: your raw score and your scaled score. And when people talk about their LSAT score, what they're usually talking about is their scaled score. Now that goes from 120 being the lowest scaled score you can get to 180 being the highest scaled score that you can get. That's the range of scores you can get on this scaled score spectrum. A couple of points of interest along that spectrum. 153 is the 50th percentile score. So that means over the last few years, half of the people who take the LSAT get a score under 153, and half of the people get a score above 153. A little further up, 12 points up that spectrum, we get the 90th percentile score is 165. So that's starting to be like, oh, that's a score you can use to get into some of the best law schools in the nation. Even further up that spectrum, we get 174 being the 99th percentile score, meaning over the last few years, 99% of the people who take the LSAT get a score under 174. Only 1% get a 174 or higher. That is, of course, the meal ticket score. If you get that score, you can pretty much go to any law school you want to, assuming you don't have like a long criminal record behind you. But yeah, so those are some of the points of interest along this scaled score spectrum. Hard to say. But another thing you might want to consider when thinking about what your LSAT score is going to be is your raw score. The raw score simply refers to the number of multiple choice questions you answered correctly. So adding up all of these scored multiple choice sections on your LSAT across those 3 sections, your raw score is going to be simply the number of those questions you sent in the right response to. Now, it's worth noting that there's no guessing penalty on the LSAT. They don't penalize you for putting an answer down and that answer being wrong. So you should always select an answer choice. If you're unsure about what the right answer is, put an answer choice down. Go with your best guess. If you don't have time to make an honest attempt on a certain question, you should still put in at least one answer choice, or exactly one answer choice. I always get this question, so I might as well anticipate it and answer it now. If you're guessing, what should your guess be? Which answer choice did you guess? B is a good option. B as in Bravo. That's been slightly overrepresented as correct answer responses on all the released LSATs. So pretty good option to go with, although it's no guarantee, of course. But you might as well get the, chance of getting it right by putting in a guessing penalty. So raw score, number of multiple choice questions you answer correctly. Scaled score, a number between 120 and 180. How do those two relate to each other? Well, there's a conversion chart. And every test has its own conversion chart. Changes a little bit from test to test, but this is kind of like the modal conversion chart. Kind of typical run-of-the-mill LSAT. As you can see, these are the number of questions you have to answer correctly to get various scores on the LSAT. So we're looking at some of the scores of the LSAT that we mentioned earlier, 153 being kind of like the 50th percentile score. You can see in order to get that score of 153, you need to answer 45 questions correctly. 45 out of 75 questions get that score of 153. Now, I, of course, can't see you right now. I have no idea what your faces look like, but I assume most of you, your chins just kind of chins on your table in front of you, mouths agape. That's pretty shocking, right? The kind of median test taker goes into the LSAT, probably studied for some time, try their best, get the benefit of answering a few questions correctly just by guessing. And still, they only get 45 out of 75 questions correct. They've missed almost every other question. Again, that's the median test taker. Half the test takers do worse. So when you hear people say that the LSAT is a hard test, that's really what they mean. It's a test that by design makes it so half of the test takers are missing almost every other question, if not more. So that's what makes the LSAT really rather difficult. Moving up to some of the other points of interest, we said a 165 was like the 90th percentile score. to get 61 out of 75 questions correct to get that. So what would be like a B minus on a real test would be like an A on the LSAT. And that score of 174, doing better than 99% of the people who have been taking the LSAT over the last few years, you can still miss 5 questions to get that. So LSAT, really a difficult test by design. Like I said, though, this score conversion chart isn't static. It changes from test to test. Sometimes the LSAT might be a little bit more difficult, has harder questions overall. In that case, you might not have to answer as many questions correctly to get a given score. Like maybe to get that score of 174, you can miss 7 questions now. Sometimes tests are a little bit easier. They have easier questions. So in that case, you'd have to answer more questions correctly to get a given score. So to get that 174, now you can only miss 4 questions to get that. To get that 165, now you have to answer 1 more question correctly. So, when people talk about, oh, this was a really hard LSAT or this was an easier LSAT, what they're really referring to is like the subjective experience as you're taking the test. You're not really talking about the objective rules or the objective standards of getting a certain score, because that kind of gets evened out with these score conversion charts. So if you have a harder test, you don't have to answer as many questions. If you have an easier test, you have to answer more questions correctly to get a given score. Angelina has a quick question. How do I schedule my test for the September LSAT? So I'll be getting an email from Prometric. September scheduling should go out early August, I believe. But you can check the LSAT website to get information on that for a more specific date. Maybe Katie can provide that if she's not too busy. A couple other scores you might get on your score report. Percentile score. That just refers to the percentage of test takers who earned a score lower than you over the past 3 years. If you got a 90th percentile score, that means 90% of test takers got a score worse than you over the past 3 years. Not something you have to be super concerned about. There's also the score band. That's the range of scaled scores that the test makers think you would earn over multiple LSATs. So a little bit above the score you got, a little bit below the score you got. Really, law schools don't care about that. As far as I can tell, I've never heard of law schools looking for people scoring in certain score bands. So I don't need to worry about that one, but those are what they are, just in case. A couple more questions I want to answer. Oh, wow, good catch, Karen. Today's the last day to register for the September 2023 test. The question we had before is about scheduling, though. I think scheduling the specific time and day you would like to take that is going to be in early August, though. Priya asks if the test is historically easier or harder on a given month. Nope. Hard to predict whether your specific LSAT will be easier or harder. Additionally, there's not just one LSAT that goes out during an LSAT administration. There's actually multiple LSATs that go out in a given administration. Usually the test makers will kind of have like 2 or 3 logical reasoning sections that they're going to give to test takers, 2 or 3 reading comp sections that they're going to give to test takers, 2 or 3 logic game sections they're going to give to test takers. And those various sections get combined to different kind of Frankenstein tests. So the test you're taking might have the same logic game section as the test that the person next to you is taking, but you have different logical reasoning and reading comp sections. So it's all kind of by chance whether your test is going to be quote unquote easier or harder. Matt asked, statistically, are correct answers in logic game section more heavily skewed towards D or E to ensure that students spend more time on each answer? Nope. As I said, cross sections, B is the kind of slightly most common correct answer, at least on the LSATs they released to us. So no. B is the most common correct answer on all three sections. Arlie also asks how many times were you able to retake the test? We'll get to that in just a bit. Short answer, 5 times within 5 years, 7 times overall. Oh, they're all exceptions to that. Alexis says, when I'm taking practice tests, should I value my raw score more? Is that a better indicator? Well, both are good indicators because as long as you're using the correct scaled score conversion chart, your 160 or whatever you get on a GAT test is going to be based on a raw score of, let's say, 56. So, those get correlated with each other based on the test. So short answer is they both matter, but I will be talking about something that will be a useful metric you can use as you're studying in just a moment. Okay, I think I'm through all the questions so far. All right. So now we talked about how the LSAT is scored, the mechanics by which it's scored. Let's talk about what a good LSAT score actually looks like. And the answer to that is a good LSAT score is simply depends on where you want to go to law school. Good LSAT score means different things to different people because different people want to go to different law schools. Different people have different strengths and weaknesses of their application outside of their LSAT score. So really what a good score is entirely dependent on who you are and where you want to go to law school. But there's some things you can do to make sure that your LSAT score is a score that is good, meaning it's going to give you a good chance of getting accepted by the law schools you want to go to. Because law schools ultimately care the most about your LSAT score. They care about other things too. They care about your GPA and personal statement and resume and diversity and all that good stuff. But what they care about the most, what they value the most, and what is the thing that's going to kind of determine whether your application goes into the, hey, let's take a closer look at this application. I think this person is really promising. It might be a good fit for our school pile. Versus going into the, I don't think we're going to have time to look at this application. We'll probably reject this person with a really slim envelope, a really short email kind of a thing. That pile. You obviously want to go to the first pile, not the second pile. So your LSAT score is going to be the biggest determining factor on which pile your application goes into. Now, one thing you can do to kind of gauge what LSAT score you should aim to get to give you a good chance of getting into the law school you want to go to, let's look at the incoming class's median LSAT score of that particular school. So I'm totally making up a LSAT or a law school right here, the American Hypothetical School of Law, but they would post, if they did exist, 3 different median LSAT scores for their incoming class. The 25th percentile LSAT score, the 50th percentile LSAT score, and the 75th percentile LSAT score. And these figures are retrievable on the law school's website or aggregated by many different websites, including the American Bar Association, you'll all eventually belong to, hopefully. So you look up those 3 percentile scores and you think, okay, if I want a good chance of being accepted to this school, I should aim for a LSAT score, target a score somewhere between that 25th and 75th percentile. If you want to get a little bit more specific than that, you can also look at the GPA medians posted by the incoming class. Again, there's going to be a 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile median GPA for that school's incoming class. And you can use your own GPA to compare to that. So if your GPA, for instance, is somewhere in between the 25th and 50th percentile GPA, and your GPA is slightly worse than most people who are accepted to that law school, you can kind of counterbalance that by aiming to get an LSAT score somewhere between the 50th and 75th percentile score. Alternatively, if your GPA is below the 25th percentile score, you might need to do a little bit more balancing by aiming for a target LSAT score above the 75th percentile. So you can kind of use your GPA as a way to kind of gauge, where should I set my target LSAT score to give me the best shot at being accepted for this particular school? Now, irrespective of what your GPA is, it's never a bad idea to set your target LSAT score above the law school's 75th percentile, because a high LSAT score, especially high LSAT score, can result in money. Law schools want students with high LSAT scores for a bunch of different reasons, and they reward applicants who have high LSAT scores with merit-based scholarships that can really cut down the amount of tuition that you have to pay to attend that law school. That can reduce the amount of loans you have to take out to go to law school, which can give you more flexibility in the types of jobs you take after you graduate from law school. But especially a high LSAT score can result in a lot of money. If money is something that you're really concerned about, the financial commitment of going to law school, setting a high target LSAT score can be one way to alleviate the cost of attending law school and improve the flexibility you have for the type of work you might want to engage in after you finish law school. Couple of questions that have come in. Chiteka asks, do they consider graduate GPAs? They do. You can definitely include your graduate GPA as part of your law school application. However, when they calculate like the incoming classes median GPA, most law schools rely on the GPA that LSAC calculates for you. And that calculation excludes graduate GPAs. They only focus on your undergraduate GPA. So law schools can certainly consider graduate GPA. And if you want to make an argument in your application that your graduate GPA is more reflective of your current capabilities as a student than your undergraduate GPA, that's certainly an argument you can make, and that some law schools will be receptive to hearing. When we talk about these like hard number GPAs, we're referring to your undergraduate GPA. Karen asked, does your GPA still matter if you've been out of school for a number of years? Short answer is yes. What they're trying to do with your application is predict how good of a law student you're going to be. And so they're really interested in seeing evidence of how you were as a student. Now, LSAT scores are a little bit more indicative of how you're going to be as a law student than your GPA. So that's why they care about your LSAT scores the most. But they care about your GPA too, because your GPA is, of course, evidence of your student, of how you were the last time you were a student. Now, perhaps certain law schools will consider your GPA slightly less important. They'll weight your GPA slightly less heavily if you have been out of school for a number of years. And of course, you can make any narrative, you can construct any narrative you want to in your law school application. You can write in your personal statement how your work experience has really changed you and made you a more responsible, dedicated person, and that it's made you especially committed to learning about the law and trying to excel in law school. You can certainly make that argument in a personal statement or explanatory essay, but they will still factor in your GPA. There's kind of no getting around that, unfortunately, for some of us. Karen also asked, you have to be careful with merit-based scholarships. No, they offer it to you, take it. It's free money. Why not? All right, I think that's all the questions. So how about what a good LSAT score is? Important thing, you have to do a little research and set a target LSAT score for yourself based on where you want to go to law school. Once you set that target score, I want you to look at this chart. This chart shows you the required percentage of questions you have to answer correctly in order to obtain that target score on the LSAT. This is what I'm going to call your target LSAT percentage. And I think far too many LSAT takers overlook this important metric when studying for the LSAT? A really good question a little bit from Alexis earlier about whether your raw score or your scaled score is a better indicator. What I would actually be focused on is this, your target LSAT percentage, because this is an easy to calculate benchmark you can set for yourself throughout your LSAT studies. Whether you're studying with a curriculum or with a tutor or taking practice tests, this percentage is something you want to make sure you're getting close to, because you need to attain this percentage to get your target score. So let's say I set a target score for myself for 170. In order to get that score of 170, I'm going to have to answer 88% of the questions on the LSAT correctly. Maybe your target score is a little bit different. Maybe it's a little higher, maybe it's a little bit lower. Whatever your target score is, note the percentage associated with that target score. Because when I'm learning about the LSAT, I'm just like kind of learning about what these questions are, getting the hang of answering them. I want to make sure I can answer that percentage of questions correctly. If I'm going for 170 and I'm learning about, let's say, must be true questions in logical reasoning, I want to make sure that when I first learn about must be true questions, I set as a goal for myself that I can eventually answer 88% of must be true questions correctly. When I learn about different logical reasoning questions, when I start doing games or reading comprehension passages, I'm also going to want to make sure I can answer at least 88% of those questions or games or passages correctly as well. Before I move on to the next stage of the studies, when I might be start incorporating time, like doing timed exercises or taking full practice tests or taking individual sections for practice tests and working on those, this is the percentage I want to hit. So this is the metric you want to keep in mind as you're studying for the LSAT, your target LSAT percentage. This is a number that once you have your target LSAT score set, I would write down that percentage, like on a Post-it note, and post it on my computer monitor, on my wall, in my office, and keep that in mind. And remember that that is the benchmark that I'm setting for myself. And I can kind of make sure that we're hitting important goals on our study process. So we're not advancing to a stage of our study process too early before we've already established that we can answer that percentage of questions correctly. So that's something I would definitely recommend setting for yourself. And that can help you navigate a productive and efficient study process. As I mentioned earlier, no one wants to study for the LSAT for longer than they have to. So we want to make sure that we have a good study plan in place and that we execute that study plan effectively. When we talk about a study plan for the LSAT, how to study for the LSAT, there's kind of two phases I want us to think about. Two phases of studying for the LSAT. We have our study phase, we have our practice phase. Now, in here at LSATMax, we've literally divided those two phases to two separate parts of your LSATMax account, the kind of platform you use to study for the LSAT with us. So in the study phase, we have a bunch of lessons for you to learn. These lessons are going to teach you all about the different questions that appear on the LSAT, different games and passages that appear on the LSAT. It's going to teach you how to do those. It's going to teach you strategies and skills you'll need for answering those. Then it'll give you a bunch of practice questions to do, so you can kind of really instill that process for answering those questions. So once you've completed that, then you're going to move on to the practice phase, where you take a number of practice LSATs. We have all of them available on our LSATMax account. You can take however many of them you want to. This is going to be the part of the process where you take what you learned in the study phase and really apply it to practice LSATs. So you get experience taking a full practice test under the time conditions of that test, having to go from one question type to another really quickly, like you have to do on the real LSAT. You can kind of start to incorporate things like timing strategies or testing strategies. They'll help you eventually answer enough questions correctly to earn your target score. So those are the two phases I want you to think about. Now, I want to kind of dive deep. That's what that icon is meant to represent. Dive deep onto some of the goals we'll have on each phase of the LSAT. So the first phase you might be in right now is the study time phase. Remember, that's where we're just like learning about the LSAT, getting a lot of practice with applying what we're learning about each part of the LSAT. There's going to be a few goals that we want to set for ourselves during this phase. The first goal is just working through the curriculum, whatever curriculum you've chosen to utilize as you learn about the LSAT, whether that's kind of the curriculum that we offer at LSATMax or curriculum offered by someone else, or curriculum you learned about through a friend, or kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different curricula that you kind of arranged for yourself. You're going to work through all of that curriculum. At LSATMax, we have over 50 modules, each module teaching you an individual type of question or skill associated with the LSAT. That's what that looks like on our on our LSATMax account. Each module features a video lesson like the one you're looking at right now, Fundamental Skills Reading the LSAT. Each module at LSATMax also features note cards, which can help you learn various skills about the LSAT. Also feature homework questions to help you apply those skills that you learned in those lesson videos. Real LSAT questions you can try to answer utilizing the strategies you're taught, along with explanations, as you can see right there. So just kind of working through all of those. We recommend working through the modules in the order that they appear, but one nice thing about LSATMax is you can kind of choose your own adventure. We offer them to you. We offer you an order and a study calendar you can use. But if you decide that, hey, I want to kind of work through this a little bit more quickly or slowly than what's recommended, you can do that quite easily. You decide like, hey, I don't really need any more help with logic games or reading comprehension, you can skip those lessons. It's up to you. We provide all the resources for you. We provide a way that we think is a good way to go through it, but you're not kind of stuck going through one track like you might be in a live class. Additionally, if you want extra kind of personalized, customized study plan, a tutor is a great resource that can help you devise that personalized study plan. Tutor can assess your strengths and weaknesses and devise a study plan for you that can allow you to work through the curriculum as efficiently as possible. Second goal of study time is going to be developing a strong understanding of the LSAT. So the curriculum will help you learn what the questions are asking and how to approach them. The flashcards and the practice questions I mentioned earlier will allow you to practice those methods so you can apply them comfortably and efficiently, almost making those approaches second nature through repeated targeted practice. You do a certain question type so many times that now you just know how to do that question type. You look at that question type, you know exactly what to do. You can almost do it automatically without thinking consciously about how to do it. Is getting faster a goal in the study time? After all, sorry, I got a request to put the last part back up. Any questions while we do that? I don't think so. All right. Is getting faster a goal of study time? It is not. Now, this is another common misconception about studying for the LSAT. Like the first LSAT you take, you'll really feel the time crunch of taking the LSAT. And it will feel like the very first thing you have to do is get faster at the LSAT because it is a fast-paced test. However, that's not something you want to consciously focus on during the study time process. Don't want to try to get faster. All the work you want to do during the study phase is going to be untimed. Now, this might sound counterintuitive, but the goal of study time is to develop a deeper understanding of the LSAT. Develop a deeper understanding. Because once you have that understanding and you've solidified a solid approach based on good habits, you will start to move more quickly on the LSAT without even having to try to move more quickly. However, if you try to move too quickly, too early, you'll start to build bad habits that may negatively impact your understanding of the LSAT. And if you do that, then it'll be harder to go faster on the LSAT because frankly, you won't really know what you're doing. So we don't want to consciously try to get faster during this time. In fact, if we focus on building good approaches and developing a strong understanding, the getting faster part will happen without even us trying to think about it. So that's not a goal during study time. What is a goal, though, is developing that strong understanding. To develop that strong understanding, you want to review your work regularly. The LSATMax, we can give you a question journal to help you do so. This question journal will be a place where you can log every question you missed or felt shaky answering. And logging that can help you identify which concepts you need to review. Get extra review with supplemental lessons, which are offered at a number of test prep centers. At LSATMax, we have them through office hours. Message boards, or they're public message boards like on Reddit. Don't necessarily recommend those, but they're certainly available. Or more private, carefully monitored and moderated message boards like we have at LSATMax, with Discord board that I monitor. Analytics pages, which are offered at a number of test prep companies that kind of keep track of your percentages of questions you're answering correctly. Tutors can be another source you can get that extra review with. Additionally, using a question journal can help you articulate why questions are right and why questions are wrong, or why certain answer choices are wrong. And actually forcing yourself to articulate why answers are correct and incorrect brings the LSAT to your own level. Now you start to understand the LSAT with your own words, and forcing yourself to articulate these things can really, really boost your understanding of the LSAT. But most most instructors I speak to, we start to do content work for us, like actually having to start to write out why answer choices are right and wrong, tell us that they develop a much, much stronger LSAT understanding than they even had when they were an LSAT test taker. So if you can do that as a student, you can really, really boost your understanding in a way that will really help you answer questions correctly on the real test. Got a question from Chiteka, who asked, does TestMax have a question bank to work on specific question types? We do. They're on our analytics page of our LSAT account. We also have every single prep test. And you can take those as many times as you like, which is not something I can say for all of our competitors. So you will have no shortage of questions to work on. Additionally, I've made for all of our tutors different question packets to work on with their students that are sorted by question type, concept, and difficulty level to make sure that they're working on questions that'll help you and questions that are at your level. So yeah, we have a number of different question banks that you can use, whether you're working by yourself or with a tutor. Using a question journal during the study time can also help you identify patterns. Once you're like really forcing yourself to review questions, think about them, articulate why certain answers are right and wrong, start to see patterns, how the LSAT tests the same concepts over and over again. To identify those patterns, we'll be able to execute a strategy with even more precision and accuracy, and eventually greater scores will come from that. Third goal of study time is going to be accuracy. I mentioned before the target accuracy to earn that target score you have. So before you move on to the second phase, the practice phase, you should be able to consistently reach your target accuracy while working on times. It will take time to improve your accuracy. For most questions, you probably won't start at your target accuracy, but eventually you will, over time, improve your accuracy. You want to improve your accuracy to your target accuracy on every single question type that you can, so that no matter what is hard, medium, and easy on the LSAT you eventually take, you'll be ready to get a sufficient percentage of those questions correct, allowing you to earn your target score. Of course, we want to reach that target accuracy while we're working untimed in the study time phase, because eventually you're going to get to the practice section. You're taking practice exams, which, as I mentioned, are fast-paced. And you can't expect your accuracy to go up once you start taking those practice tests, those fast-paced practice tests. You need to prove that you can earn your required percentage untimed before you worry about earning that percentage while timed. This is the main reason a lot of test takers stall out or plateau in their score beneath their target score. They never actually attain that target accuracy when working untimed. They never acquired the understanding of the LSAT that will allow them to reach this target accuracy while working untimed. So essentially, they jump into practice tests too early before they've reached their target accuracy. And of course, they won't be able to reach their target score on practice tests because they never actually developed the proper understanding to give them that target accuracy. So if we want to study efficiently, if we don't want to study the LSAT for longer than we have to, it's really critical that you establish this target accuracy during the study time portion of your LSAT journey before you start worrying about taking practice exams. Big piece of advice I can offer you. So 3 goals of study time again: develop a strong work through the curriculum. So we're going to learn about the LSAT. Work through those practice problems, flashcards, and extra practice problems, like a question bank, like Chiteka mentioned, to develop a strong understanding of the LSAT and use that understanding to eventually achieve your target accuracy, whatever accuracy is required to reach your target score. That's what we're going to do during study time. Once we've achieved all 3 of those goals, we're going to go into the practice phase of our studies. In that practice phase of our studies, we'll begin to take practice tests. For most of us, if we start taking practice tests right away, it's going to be a jarring, painful experience. We don't want that. Most of us need to do a little bit of timed practice through timed exercises before we start doing practice exams. Let's dive into what timed practice looks like on the LSAT. So before we start doing full 2.5-hour practice tests on the LSAT, we want to kind of ease ourselves into test speed. Most of us going from an untimed work during the study phase straight into the major time crunch of a full practice test is just too big of a jump. So rather than diving face first into practice exams and maybe, not executing that dive very well, getting the equivalent of a belly flop, we want to kind of ease ourselves into the treacherous waters by doing timed exercises. Timed exercise I recommend for most students. So you need to take 10 questions and giving yourself a little bit more time to answer those questions than the real test would allow. So to answer 10 kind of like easy to medium level questions on the LSAT, you probably want to take about 12 minutes to do that. That's pretty hard to do, especially if we're trying to maintain that target accuracy that we have. So rather than going straight to those 12 minutes to answer 10 questions, we'll want to give ourselves a little bit more time. We start with 15 minutes to answer those 10 questions. So take 10 questions from a practice exam, give ourselves, let's say, 15 minutes to answer them, and see if we can reach our target accuracy in those 15 minutes. So this is the first time we're going to be working under the pressure of a clock, but we're not forcing ourselves to work as quickly through these material as the real LSAT full exam will require us to do. If we can get through all 10 of these questions and maintain our target accuracy, then we'll just reduce a little bit of time off that clock. We pull up another set of 10 easy to medium questions. Maybe this time give ourselves 14 minutes to answer those questions. And the nice thing about this is that we're just incrementally reducing the amount of time we give ourselves to answer these questions. So we don't have to think about working faster. We don't have to consciously force ourselves to work faster. We're just seeing if we can answer these questions in just a little bit less time. And if we can answer these questions at our target accuracy in the allotted time, that's great. We'll reduce the time once more. If we can't, that's okay. Try another 10 questions with the same amount of time. If it turns out that you just can't answer that questions at your target accuracy with that time, then go back to the review. Try to figure out if there's anything you can do to answer questions more efficiently. Maybe there's certain question types that are always taking you longer. You can review those question types. You can work with a tutor to see how you can kind of better anticipate questions so you know what the right answers you're going to say, allowing you to answer them more quickly. Whatever you need to do, you can get that extra review, then keep trying with some more timed exercises. The goal is to slowly and incrementally reduce the amount of time you can answer these questions until you're pretty close to test speed, until you're answering 10 questions in about 12 or so minutes. And once you reach that, then you can take full practice tests. You can take as many practice tests as you need to eventually earn your target score. When you take those practice tests, we have more to say about that in just a minute. We want to take them in test-like conditions. So of course, whether you choose to take the exam in person or in a test center is really going to affect how you want to take the practice tests and what environments you want to take those practice tests. We'll get into that in just a second. So we've answered a number of questions so far. Last thing I want to talk about is how long is studying going to take? It really depends on a lot of factors. One factor that's really going to affect how long the study process takes is how many hours you study each week. And what we recommend is 20 hours per week dedicated to studying the LSAT, which is a major commitment. But learning the LSAT is difficult. It's requiring new skills that you might not have already. And so developing those skills so that you can use them on a difficult test really requires dedicated practice. So we recommend 20 hours per week. We recommend that you divide those 20 hours over 5 or 6 days per week. You don't want to save all 20 hours for the weekend because one, you don't want to do 10 hours a day. That's not a good time, probably counterproductive. And you probably won't reach that 20-hour-a-week goal if you're saving it for just Saturday and Sunday. But also you want to develop some consistency. You don't want to take 4 or 5 days off, or even 2 or 3 days off in between studying for the LSAT. You want to make sure that you're building progress day in and day out. You need to be consistent in order to do that. You want to kind of build up your brain, start understanding the LSAT on its own level by doing this consistent practice. So somewhere between 2 and 4 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week will allow you to reach that 20-hour per week goal. Assuming you can reach that 20-hour week goal, you can at least set some estimates for how long studying will take. You can set some estimates based on the difference between your first LSAT test that you take, your diagnostic LSAT, and your target LSAT score. Simply subtract the scaled score you got on that diagnostic test from the target scaled LSAT score that you've set for yourself. Doing that will allow you to calculate the score increase that you're trying to make. That score increase, if it's between 1 and 10 points, you can estimate that studying will take somewhere between 2 and 4 months to make that score increase. Trying to make a larger score increase, something between 11 and 20 points, we want to estimate somewhere between 4 to 6 months of studying. If you're aiming to make a score increase of 21 or more points, we want to estimate over 6 months of studying. So obviously, the bigger jump that you're trying to make, the more time studying will likely take for you. The more time it'll take to reach that target accuracy, the more time it'll take to take practice exams so you can eventually fine-tune your approach until you're reaching your target score. And this is, of course, assuming you can have that 20 hours per week. If you don't have enough time to study for the LSAT for 20 hours each week, you might want to adjust accordingly. If you can only study the LSAT for 10 hours a week, maybe double these estimates to give you a rough picture for how long studying might take. Of course, every student is different. Just because you've been studying for 2 to 4 months and you haven't reached that score increase of 10 points doesn't mean you won't. Some students take longer, some students take shorter. We're all unique creatures who have a bunch of differences, including how long it takes us to study for the LSAT. So yeah, might be different, but this is based on our experience, kind of how to roughly estimate how long studying might take for you. Nice thing about LSATMax as opposed to some other test services is that we allow you to study for a long time if you need it. We allow you to study for longer if you need it. Instead of having a set course that kind of funnels you into a specific LSAT, it doesn't allow you to take more time to study if you need it. It lets you take as much time as you need, allow you to go at the pace that you need to. So that's something that you can definitely do easily with our platform. Last thing, or one of the last things I want to talk about before we start talking about more about the changes to the LSAT, should you work for a tutor? This is a complicated question, and tutors can certainly benefit anyone who wants to use their services. Working with a tutor is also a matter of financial circumstance, because working with a tutor is not cheap. But if you're thinking about working with a tutor, something I want to talk about is the different kinds of LSAT tutors you might encounter. By my mind, there's 4 types of LSAT tutors you might encounter. There's the bad tutors, there's the deceptive tutors, there's the good tutors, and there's the great tutors, the true nerds who are goated. So there's a lot of bad tutors. By the way, you can read more of this at a blog post I wrote on our blog, the LSAT Edge. There's the URL for you to reach if you want to learn more about this. Bad tutors are going to make the material more confusing for you. These tutors have limited knowledge of the LSAT or the LSAT curriculum, maybe lack qualifications, like they didn't actually receive a high LSAT score, they don't have teaching experience, they can't answer your questions or engage with your learning style. I don't want to dwell on the bad tutors. They're certainly out there. There's some tutors who are bad because the LSAT is not their specialty. They teach a number of tests. The LSAT they kind of know about, but sometimes they get it confused like the GRE or the GMAT. Sometimes they're working for themselves, working for a prep test company that doesn't have high qualifications for their tutors. Don't want to dwell on them too much. Obviously, you want to avoid those tutors. What I want to talk a little bit more about is the deceptive tutors, because in my experience, most LSAT tutors are deceptive tutors. By deceptive tutors, I mean, these are tutors who only make you think that you are improving. What these tutors do is they just explain to you how they solve LSAT questions. Here is how I would do it. Here's how I think about it. Here's how I look through these answer choices. Here's how I'd set up this logic game. Here's how I read this passage. Here's how I'd answer this question. And these are deceptive tutors because they really make you feel like you're learning. Like, oh, wow, it just makes so much sense when this tutor is telling me how they're answer this logical reasoning question or break down this reading comprehension passage or approach this logic game. This is making a lot of sense to me. What these tutors aren't doing is engaging you or asking you questions. Instead of helping you solve these questions, they're kind of solving it for you. What happens when you're working with a deceptive tutor is you feel like you're doing really good when you're working with the tutor. Then when you sit home by yourself, try to do these problems yourself, you find like, oh, wait, I still can't do these. I could do it. It makes sense to me when this tutor is doing it for me, but when I'm doing it at home by myself, no longer with this tutor, I'm kind of back to square one. I'm not doing any better than I was before I met with that tutor. Like I said, in my experience, most LSAT tutors are these deceptive tutors. So something you really, really want to make sure of if you're going to dedicate the time to work with this tutor, or if you're going to dedicate the money to working with the tutor, so you are not working with the deceptive tutor. Because that, in my opinion, it's maybe not as bad as working with a bad tutor who's only going to make it more confusing for you. These deceptive tutors are not going to help you. you want to make sure that you're working with a good or great tutor. Now, a good tutor is going to teach the LSAT to you their way. They have a cogent and comprehensive LSAT curriculum. Most of these tutors work for test prep companies that have a cogent and comprehensive LSAT curriculum, and these tutors are going to deliver that to you in a really effective way. You're going to make sure you learn that LSAT curriculum. You're going to check in to make sure you understand this material. Hey, do you have any questions about this? Did that make sense to you? Is that okay for you? You check in to make sure you understand that. Most of the time, if they're doing a good job, you're going to say, yeah, that made sense to me. And you say, hey, can you explain that again? They'll be able to do that. And they can help you create a study plan to help you learn that curriculum. So good tutors are really effective. They're most effective for people whom that LSAT curriculum makes sense. If you choose to work with an if you choose to work with an LSAT test prep company, and that company's curriculum makes sense to you, a good tutor is going to do a great job helping you learn that curriculum. What that good tutor might not be able to do is the extra mile that a great tutor can provide. Because for most of us, these LSAT prep companies, comprehensive LSAT curricula, they mostly work. There might be a few strategies, a few approaches that don't quite work for us, that don't quite make as much sense for us. What a great tutor can do is make sure that you learn the LSAT your way. So if there's anything that doesn't make sense for you in that LSAT curriculum, you're still going to be able to find an approach that works for you. Hey, the way this company teaches must be true questions isn't really working for me. A good tutor might be like, let's keep working that way until you figure it out. A great tutor will be able to say, hey, that approach isn't working for you. Cool, no worries. Let's find a new approach that does. So a great tutor can teach the LSAT in many different ways, including the way that's going to work the best for you. What this great tutor is going to do is ask you questions to test your understanding. Hey, I want to teach the student this way to approach must be true questions. Because I'm teaching them that way to approach must be true questions, and ask them questions to see if they're getting it. Not like basic questions like, did that make sense? More specific questions. Questions that challenge that student to respond. So a tutor can tell whether you're getting it or not, whether that approach is working for you or not. And based on that, the great tutor can either continue teaching that way, or if it's not working for you, find a new way to teach you that method. Great tutor can also customize and continuously revise the study plan based on your needs. So whether you choose to work with a tutor is a very personal decision based on a number of factors that are personal to you. But if you do choose to work with a tutor, you obviously want to avoid the bad and deceptive tutors and aim to work with a good or great tutor. And these are the factors that I believe distinguish the good and great tutors from the bad and deceptive tutors. Just wanted to make sure that information is out there to help you navigate which tutor you choose to work with, should you choose to work with a tutor. All right, now, when to take the LSAT? Don't sign up quite yet. Before you sign up for the LSAT, you want to at least finish the study phase of your LSAT before signing up. Now, you don't have to have already reached your target score before you sign up for the LSAT. Well, you should at least be like taking practice tests by the time you sign up for the LSAT. The registration deadlines for most exams are about 6 weeks before the exam. As someone pointed out earlier, today is the deadline to sign up for the September exam. Now, you want to be pretty confident that within the 6 weeks between you signing up for the test, actually taking the test, you can reach that target score. If you've already signed up, you can schedule or withdraw for a full refund. The deadline to do so is usually the same day as the registration deadline. So if you're signed up to take the September LSAT, and like you're listening to what I have to say today, and you're like, oh, I don't think I've reached these benchmarks that Ross described. I think I'm probably going to have to study for the LSAT for a bit longer than I anticipated. I think it's going to take me longer than September to prepare for the LSAT. Totally fine. Withdraw today for a full refund or schedule it, your LSAT for a later date. I had a question earlier about taking the November LSAT in 2023. We're going to address that in just a second, how the November LSAT changes to that LSAT then, or what those changes are going to be. Now, if you are thinking about withdrawing from an exam or rescheduling an exam, confirm the deadlines to do so by going to lsac.org/LSAT dates. Those will give you the deadlines for all the various LSATs. Now, in terms of choosing which day you want to take the LSAT, assuming you haven't signed up already, let's say you want to begin law school in the fall of 2025. Well, in that case, you're going to want to take the LSAT sometime in 2024. That should be your goal. Generally speaking, and this is pretty easy to remember, you want to take the LSAT the year before you're going to begin law school. And that's because the admissions are going to open, so law schools will start accepting applications during that year. Usually September or October of the year before you'll begin law school, admissions will be open. Usually admissions close somewhere in March or April or May, or sometimes even as late as June or July the following year. That's what we call the application cycle. So we're currently in the application, or we're about to start the application cycle for the 2024 class. Class will begin in 2024. I used slightly later dates because I imagine a lot of us want to start law school in 2025. But if you are looking to begin law school in 2024, just move these back 1 year. So ideally, we'll be taking the LSAT in that case in 2023. If you want to begin law school in 2025, you'll want to aim to take the LSAT in 2024. Why the urgency? Well, law schools use something called rolling admissions. And that means they start admitting applicants as soon as they begin accepting applications. So right when that door opens in September, October, we'll start sending acceptance letters. Now, it does vary from school to school when exactly they start accepting students, but regardless of the school, it's better to apply early before they've given away a ton of seats. When they have a lot of seats open, they're concerned with filling this classes up, will give you an advantage to apply a little bit early. So in order to apply early, you'll need to take the LSAT before those admissions open up. Attaining your LSAT score by September allows you to apply early, and perhaps even take advantage of the early decisions options offered by that school. It also gives you the chance to retake the LSAT if you have to. Now, if you have to take the LSAT between September and December of the year before you plan on starting law school, that can be okay too. Your application won't even be late in the cycle as long as you compile your application materials as you study for the LSAT. So if you do that, ideally, the last component of your application that you're waiting on is your LSAT score. Once you get that LSAT score back, you can hit send on your applications. It'll be pretty early in the cycle. Most people don't really get their applications in until December or January. So if you have to take the LSAT in September or December, application won't necessarily be late. What will make your application a little bit late in the cycle will be if you take the LSAT the same year you plan on starting law school. So ideally, you want to try to avoid those LSATs that are held the same year you plan on beginning law school. Now, if you have to take the LSAT during that time, make sure you compile your application materials as you're studying for the LSAT. and submit your application as soon as you have your LSAT score. Other factors to consider: obviously, studying for the LSAT is a big time commitment, as we mentioned. So you want to think about when you'll have time. Oh, yes, Alexis, by application materials, personal statement, letters of recommendation, resumes, any additional essays like an explanatory essay or a diversity statement. You have all of that stuff ready to go. Transcripts, can't forget about those. You have all of that stuff ready to go. So the last part you're waiting on is your LSAT score. Also, factors to consider when you plan on taking the LSAT: are you going to have time to study? If there's a time of year when you're going to be less busy at school or work, or whether you want to use any breaks in your work or school schedule to study more intensively, that's something also to consider. Now, ultimately, the most important factor is whether you feel prepared to earn your target score. Take the time you need to achieve that confidence. You should feel optimistic that you can begin earning your target score within the 6 weeks after you sign up. Remember, the deadline is 6 weeks before the actual LSAT. You should feel pretty confident that you can reach your target score in that interregnum, that 6-week interregnum. Take the time you need. One really wise thing that one of our former instructors mentioned to me was his theory that you can either choose an LSAT date, or you can choose an LSAT score, or you can seldom do both. Most people don't have the luxury of doing both. So if they choose their LSAT date before they've chosen their LSAT score, you're going to force themselves to take the test before they're ready. And choosing that LSAT date at the time before they're ready is going to come at the expense of earning that score. Instead, what we think is the better way to approach the LSAT is to choose your score. I want to get a 170 on this test, so I'm going to take the time I need to get a 170. So I'm not going to choose my LSAT date. I'm going to wait until I've earned that LSAT score, and then I'll take the date that allows me to earn that score, whatever date that is. I think that's a pretty good way of thinking about it. Do you want to choose your date? Do you want to choose your score? I think most of us would rather choose our score. Another thing I want to talk about briefly is the score preview option. This is an option available through your LSAC account. So it'll give you the ability to cancel or retain your LSAT score within 6 days of receiving your score. So how this works is you purchase this option through your LSAC account. You say, I'm taking the LSAT in, let's say, November. I want to purchase the score preview option. What's going to happen is when the scores are released for the LSAT for everybody, they're going to give you your score you earned on that November LSAT. Then you're going to have the option of either canceling that score or keeping that score. You choose to cancel it, it gets wiped away. It will not appear on your score report. Law schools will not be able to see that score. It'll just show up that it was canceled at the test taker's request. If you choose to keep it, because you're happy with it, presumably, it's going to stay on your score history report that law schools can see. You have to make this decision within 6 days of receiving your score. Now, law schools will only see that the score is canceled at your request. Now, this relates to the question or comment that Alexis just offered. Score preview option will not make your application significantly stronger. Law schools really only care about your highest LSAT score. That's the score they're required to report to the ABA. That's the score that affects their rankings. The lower scores that you got along the way, they don't care about those as much. They don't have to report them if they don't want to. Those won't affect their rankings. So they don't care about those lower scores. So the score preview option doesn't make your applications really stronger. But what the option can do is help some test takers feel more relaxed and confident on test day. Even if it won't really make your application stronger, some of us just feel better and more confident, more relaxed, less anxious if we know we can cancel that score if something goes really wrong. So if you think that might make you feel more relaxed and confident, and you can afford the expense of the score preview option, we recommend doing it. Make sure you purchase it before your test day. It's a little cheaper if you purchase it before the test as opposed to after the test. So make sure you purchase it before the test day, save a little bit of money. If that helps you feel more relaxed and confident as you take the LSAT, that's great. That might improve your score a little bit, but it's not necessary. If you don't use it, if you don't want to spend that extra money, it's not like your application will be worse as a result. As I mentioned before, the score preview is not going anywhere. That's not one of the changes. However, there was a change to the score preview that happened last year. It used to be that the score preview was only offered to test takers who are taking the LSAT for the first time. That is no longer true. Score preview is now available to all test takers, irrespective of whether you've taken the LSAT before. You also get to decide what time and what day you'll take the LSAT. You'll receive a scheduling email for the at-home test about a week before the LSAT. For the at-person test, it's a couple of weeks, or it's over a month before the LSAT. What we recommend is to try to sign up for a time slot during the time you normally study for the LSAT. So if you usually study around noon, you should probably take the LSAT around noon. That's the time where you've trained yourself to perform at the peak of your LSAT abilities. That's a documented phenomenon known as state-dependent testing. You should also take the LSAT in the same room you studied in. You're taking the at-home option if possible. All right, so we've answered a number of questions so far. What's on the LSAT, how the LSAT is scored, what's a good score, how to study for the LSAT, when you should take the LSAT. Let's talk about how the LSAT's changing. There's a few different changes that are happening this year. I want to talk about those. First thing I want to clarify is that the logic games are not going anywhere in the 2023 and 2024 cycle. In my experience, this is the biggest misconception that test takers have. They are convinced that logic games are going away this year. They are not. That is explicitly on LSAC's website. If you don't believe me, they've also sent this to us via email. This is proof that the logic games are not going anywhere. If you're taking the LSAT this year, you'll be taking the logic game section, so it behooves you to learn logic games. You can read more about that at that link if you are interested. All other sections, by the way, will also be staying the same. Now, one big change that's coming up is that now you can choose whether you take the LSAT at home or at a Prometric test center. Prometric is a big company that operates many, many test centers across the US and Canada. I forget the exact figure, but it's like thousands and thousands of test centers. The idea is no matter where you are in the US or Canada, there is a Prometric test center that's not too far away from you. So if you want to take the LSAT at a test center, that option is now available to you. Now, the at-home test will remain quite similar to the at-home testing experience that the LSAT has offered since 2022. So not much is changing there. The people who are proctoring it is changing. It's no longer the service called ProctorU. Now it's Prometric that will be offering their own remote proctors. But otherwise, the at-home test experience will remain the same. The test center option is the new one. The test center option will allow you to schedule when and where you want to take the exam. Now, if you took the LSAT a long time ago, back in the pre-2020 days with the old test centers I was describing at the beginning of this webinar, those are no longer, that's not the experience that they're offering now. Starting in the August 2023, the test center option will be at a Prometric test center, but you can choose when and where you'll be taking the test using the ProScheduler system. Scheduling will open, You can schedule using that Pro Scheduler option within 7 days of when scheduling opens. If you signed up for the test center option, but later decide you'd rather take the test remotely, you can make the change using the Pro Scheduler up until 3 days before the test. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you will not be taking the LSAT writing section at a test center. That you have to do remotely. Now, I want to go back to that last point. One thing that they used to offer in the last few years of the at-home test was loaner devices and hotel vouchers. So if you did not have the requisite equipment to take the LSAT at home, or you do not have a quiet space at your home that you can take the LSAT, the LSAC would mail you a loaner device, a tablet that you could use to take the LSAT at home, or reimburse you for up to $150 to stay at a hotel for 1 day to use that hotel to take the exam. They're not doing that anymore. Now that they have the test center option, they're telling everyone who does not have the requisite equipment to take the LSAT at home, or who doesn't have the quiet space to take the LSAT at home, to take it at a test center. So if you don't have the right equipment to take the LSAT at home, if you don't have the right internet connection to take the LSAT at home, if you don't have a quiet space to take the LSAT at home, LSAC is recommending that you take the LSAT at a test center. So if you think you either have to or want to take the LSAT at a test center, we have some questions about how you should prepare for the LSAT. Now, the only difference I would tell you if you're taking the LSAT at a test center is once you reach the practice phase of your studies, start to take practice tests in quiet public spaces, such as a public library. I think this is really important because the test centers you go to take the LSAT are not going to have 50 different people all taking the LSAT at the same time as you. There's going to be people at different workstations taking different tests. And they might be getting up as you're taking the LSAT. Might be shuffling out of the testing center as you're taking the LSAT. Might be a little bit of quiet murmuring to each other or asking the proctor something as you're trying to take the LSAT. So there's going to be some ambient noise and slight distractions in a test center. If you have to take the LSAT at a test center, if you want to take the LSAT at a test center, you should train yourself to take practice exams in a similar environment. Another place where there'll be some ambient noise and minor distractions, a place like a public library where people are generally quiet. There might be some whispers to each other. There are people getting up and moving about. You want to be able to take the LSAT without getting distracted by all of that stuff going around. So we would recommend taking practice tests in a public library or a similar space. We plan on taking the test at a test center. Now, as I said, there'll be some distractions at these test centers, so you want to get used to those distractions. Additionally, before the test, just make sure you know how long it'll take to get to the test center and how you'll check in. There's information available for you on Prometrics YouTube page. That's the link right there if you want to check it out. It's also on LSAC's FAQ on taking the test at a test center. Just some stuff to be on the lookout for. You want to eliminate as many test day stresses as you can. So knowing what to expect is a pretty good idea. Now, another change, LSAC has removed the yearly cap on the number of times you can retake the LSAT. You can read more at that link. Now, previously, you could only take the LSAT 3 times in one LSAT year. That goes from June of one year to May of the following year. They've removed that yearly cap. Starting in August 2023, the LSAC removes the 3 LSATs in one LSAT year cap. So that means you can now take the LSAT more than 3 times in a year, but not more than 5 times. Because that 5 times in 5 LSAT years, that's staying in effect. So now you have a maximum taking the LSAT, I suppose, 5 times in 1 year. There's a few exams that the LSAT that cap does not include. Does not include any LSATs that you may have taken before September 2019, and any of the LSAT-flex exams, which were held between May of 2020 and June of 2021. Those do not count, but all other tests taken between September 2019 and today, all of those are included, including tests where you canceled your score with or without the score preview option. That's 7 times total. So you can only take the LSAT 7 times in your natural lifetime. However, we do not think that removal of the retake or the updated retake policy should change your study plan. Again, don't sign up until you're almost ready to earn your target score. We want you to only take the LSAT once. We don't want you to take the LSAT 5 times in a year. We don't want you to spend over $1,000 to take the LSAT 5 times. Don't sign up until you're ready. You want to take the LSAT as few times as you have to. So if you just wait before signing up, you don't have to take the LSAT multiple times. Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. But we think if you just wait until you're ready, you won't have to take the LSAT as many times as they're now allowing. So we don't think this is going to be a change. This isn't going to augur a change to your study plan. Another really minor change used to be when they use words on the LSAT like cannot and accept, they scream them at you, they put them in all caps. No longer the case. Those are now in lowercase bold. So slight difference from what the practice exams show to what it looks like now. This is the format you're going to see now. They're bold. It's not capitalized. Still hard to miss. Something we wanted to mention. So those are the changes to the LSAT, and I just barely got through all of that in 1 hour, 2 hours. Now, before I talk a little bit more about LSATMax and answer any other questions that you dropped in the Q&A section, I do want to just kind of talk about our goals at LSATMax, because there's a lot of test prep companies out there, and I encourage you to look at as many of them as you can when choosing how to study for the LSAT. So I just want to talk a little bit about kind of our goals at LSATMax, what we try to prioritize and how we teach the LSAT, and some of the goals I've had as the content director at LSATMax. So you can just learn a little bit about what we're about. Now, what my goal has been at LSATMax and what our collective goals have been at LSATMax is to make the LSAT as understandable and accessible to our students as we can. We don't want to make the LSAT seem like this crazy, abstract, hard thing that you need a philosophy degree to actually do well in. We don't think that's true. That doesn't really describe any of us at LSATMax who've taken the LSAT. We weren't LSAT naturals. We had to learn how to do this ourselves. And so we want to carry some of the experiences we had while trying to learn the LSAT for ourselves into how we teach the LSAT for the students who choose to use our services. We really want to make the LSAT understandable, accessible, and intuitive to our students. We're really proud to work for a company like LSATMax, so I think we do a really good job at that. Initially, we try to take a really student-first approach to what we offer to make sure we're offering you as much as we can if you choose to study with us. So how do we do that? We try to have a thoughtful study plan, one that makes the LSAT digestible, approachable, easily understandable, and intuitive for our test takers. We try to offer proven strategies. We think of strategies. We teach these strategies. They work with our students. We continue to offer those strategies. If they don't, we don't offer them. We change them if necessary. We listen to our tutors who sometimes come up with new strategies for approaching these. We incorporate those new strategies into our curriculum. So to make sure that you're getting the best, most intuitive, most easily applied strategies as possible. We have an easy to use digital platform that allows you to study at your own pace. in your own time. We offer you extended access to these materials and a lot of materials to work from, especially helpful during that practice phase of your studies. And we offer you support and encouragement throughout it. Although we are a digital platform, we don't want you to feel alone while you're studying for the LSAT. We have employees like Katie, who's here today, to talk to you, help you throughout your process. Even though I mostly work behind the scenes, I'm easily reachable. I monitor a Discord board where I answer students' questions every single day. We have instructors on call every day to host office hours where they can teach you different aspects of the LSAT and answer any questions that you have. Even though you will technically be studying remotely, in that you'll be studying with us in a classroom, we don't ever want you to feel like you're remote from the people who are teaching the LSAT. We're easily reachable to try to use the support and encouragement throughout this process. So that's our goal, hopefully allow you to earn a life-changing score increase on this test. So these are how you can study with us. These are some of the things that we offer. I'm gonna have these on the board so you can kind of see what we offer to help you get that score increase. While you look that over, I'm going to answer the questions in the Q&A. If you have any more questions, just put them in this Q&A. I will answer them in the order that they appear. So first question is from Justin. Justin asks the pros and cons to at-home versus testing facility. Now, I would say if you can take the test at home, you should take the test at home. So if you have the equipment to take the test at home, if you have the internet connection that'll allow you to take the test at home without being disconnected, if you have a quiet space to take the test at home, you should take the at-home test. And the reason behind that is a phenomenon called state-dependent testing. The psychologists who have studied this have found that if you take a test in the same place and within the same conditions and mental state that you were in when you study for that test, you will perform better on that test. Or at least they see a connection between those two things. So you are setting yourself up to get a better score on the LSAT if you take the test in the same place and under the same conditions that you studied for that test. So if you're studying for the test at home primarily, you should take the test at home. So if you are able to take the test at home, I would recommend that. If you have to take the test in a test center, that's okay. We described some of the things to do to help prepare for that, namely taking the test, starting to take practice exams in a public space like a public library to help get used to kind of the testing conditions of a test center. Matt had a question that I answered earlier, so I'm going to skip that one. Next question is from Karen. Karen asks, I'm scheduled to take the September 2023 LSAT. I want to know if LSATMax would still be useful for me to sign up for. I would say, yeah, we can definitely help you increase your points by a little bit. So as you can see right now, we have a monthly subscription that would be pretty, the cheapest option for you, just 1 month at $249 plus whatever discounts we're offering that you may be entitled for. Yeah, we can definitely help you with that. There's going to be office hours that you can look at that will kind of give you like last minute testing strategies. If you know there's specific areas you need to work on, we'll be able to address those areas through either those office hours or through our curriculum. What might be most helpful for you to kind of boost some points in this kind of last month before the September test is going to be tutoring. A tutor is going to be able to locate places where you can earn points pretty quickly and easily and help you earn those points. That might be the most efficient way to boost your score by some points before the September test. So, although you don't really have enough time to take the full LSATMax course before the September test, we have a variety of ways where you choose to just purchase access to the LSATMax account or also purchase access to tutoring to boost your score. Let's see. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. If we take the test in person, do you have to take the writing section the same day, or are they allowing you to take it at home? I think I answered this one already, but essentially, you cannot take the writing section at the test center. You have to take that at home, or at least remotely. So yeah, that service is not offered at a test center. Additionally, if you take the test at a test center, you will not be bringing your own computer. You will be using the computers provided to you by that test center. Next question is also from an anonymous attendee. Is it visible to law schools if you have rescheduled your test multiple times? Nope, they don't see reschedules. They just see canceled tests and tests you withdrew from and tests that you didn't show up for. And also the test that you did take and received a score on, obviously. Cynthia asks, I could have graduated in May, but I like to take several more classes to boost my GPA. Would it be better to drop a class so I can devote more time to the LSAT? That's kind of hard for me to answer, not knowing how much time these courses you're taking are really how many hours per week you have to dedicate to these courses. If you don't have to take these courses and you need to drop a course in order to be able to study 20 hours per week, I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, how much can just one class really boost your GPA? Not that much. 20 hours per week can make a substantial increase to your LSAT score. That's something to consider. So, your schedule better than I do, obviously. But I do stand by that 20-hour per week study goal. So if you need to drop a class in order to reach that goal, I definitely consider it. Grace asks, for the in-person LSAT, do you know if we have to bring our own scratch paper and pencils, or are those provided? Plan on bringing your own. I think Katie looked into this before, whether the test centers provide it. I don't think they do, but they might. But yeah, I would definitely bring your own just in case. Does LSATMax provide credit for tutoring? Yes, we provide exclusively good and great tutors as well. I make sure of that in the hiring and training process. So yeah, rest assured that we have tutoring and we have good tutors too. Great tutors even. Adam says, do you risk losing out on merit scholarship money pool if you do not get your applications in until, let's say, November? Does it not make a substantial difference? So in terms of getting a scholarship, it is better to apply early because they do many law schools offer these merit-based scholarships on a rolling basis as well. However, November would be early. You would not be risking out on losing. You would not be risking out on losing opportunities for merit-based scholarships if you waited until November. If you waited until March or April, yeah, I think you are setting yourself up to have a lesser chance of getting merit-based scholarships. But of course, if the school has the money and they want you as a test taker, or they want you as an applicant, might even offer it to you as late as then. But yeah, generally speaking, same rules apply to merit-based scholarships as acceptance letters. The earlier the better, as long as you have that LSAT score that's going to entitle you to that acceptance letter or merit-based scholarship. Okay. I think that is all of the questions so far. So Karen asked about FAFSA and law school. Do you still need to fill out if you're looking for financial aid? I believe so, but don't quote me on that. That's a little outside my area of expertise. But yeah, that's something you can look into. LSAC's website should have some information on that. I'm kind of pulling that up right now for you, Karen. Oh, another question came in from Araceli. You mentioned that tests taken in 2020 are not going to be counted as the 7 LSAT tests in a lifetime. Yeah, if you took the lsat-flex in 2020, so those would be the tests offered in like May and June and July, etc. during that year, those will not be counted towards that 7 LSATs in a lifetime limit. However, there were non-flex LSATs that were offered in January and February of 2020. You took those will count towards that limit. Okay. Well, so those all the questions? I think so. Well, in that case, thank you so much for hanging out with me during the session and learning a bit about the LSAT. As I mentioned at the beginning, love doing these to get some free and hopefully clear advice to you to make your study process as smooth and efficient and successful as possible. So I wish you the best of luck in that study process. I hope to see you use our services. So I hope to see you at some of our office hours or in our Discord board or on the the other places we might see you at LSATMax. But no matter how you study for the LSAT, I do want to wish you the best of luck. And if you want some more of my advice, I have some other LSAT videos on our YouTube page. If you sign up for our free account, you'll have access to some of the videos I have written about studying for the LSAT. Also check out our blog that we've linked to a few times here for more advice on the LSAT. We continue to update those as we learn more about the changes to the LSAT in 2023, 2024. So with all of that said, bid you adieu, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and happy studying out there, everyone. And once again, thanks to Katie for helping me out in the comment section. Really, really helpful throughout. So take care, enjoy. See you on the other side.